Hey there and welcome, this is Sayurizu. Today in this video, I'm going to be walking you through how to use Custom System Builder within Foundry VTT to bring your tabletop systems to life. Before you dive in, just a quick disclaimer, I'm not a JavaScript coder, and I don't even think I could honestly code a simple print line statement within JavaScript without having to look that up. So if you're looking for something with JavaScript, unfortunately, you are going to have to look elsewhere, and that does limit some of what we can do within Custom System Builder and Foundry, especially when it comes to macros and advanced automation. That being said, I've still been able to build some really cool things and have a lot of fun doing it within Custom System Builder. Gotten a lot of support from the community on Discord, which if you do run into issues you can't solve on your own or this tutorial doesn't walk you through some of the more of the advanced features, you absolutely should join the Discord, which you can find on the GitHub page right here. Link is right here, and I'll take you straight to the Foundry Discord server. And under the custom systems, there is a official custom system builder channel in which somebody in the community will absolutely be willing to help you out, especially Martin here. He has been like the backbone of the community, pointing people to normally something buried within this wiki, but has absolutely been phenomenal about helping people out. So just with the core tools Custom System Builder provides, as well as a little bit of HTML, a little bit of CSS, I'll show you some really cool stuff that we can build. So if you're not familiar, Foundry VTT is an amazing piece of software, unparalleled in just the flexibility and the ability to make really cool stuff within tabletops, not having a monthly subscription like some other providers, as well as since you're hosting the server yourself, you're not as limited on what you can do in terms of modules, macros, file storage, upload, all that stuff you can absolutely handle on your own system. That being said, the system is built within the Foundry VTT native app. We are on version 12 of build 331. And I will be using Windows, and that will come up for your file management. So if you're using Linux or Mac OS or something else, you will need to figure out the directories and how those are a little bit different from my environment. That being said, Custom System Builder really just builds on Foundry VTT and the flexibility it offers, just giving you the ability to bring any system you really want, your own rule system, stats, gameplay mechanics, and all that without really needing to write a full system from scratch, which is really helpful if you're like me and you can't code JavaScript. And it also, even if you can code JavaScript, I know a lot of people who use it because it speeds up development time. You don't have to write out a lot of core functions when you can just pull them straight out of Custom System Builder. So whether you're making something like gritty and realistic or just over the top and magical, it's going to be yours, and Custom System Builder can absolutely help you get there. So without further ado, let's jump in, take a look around, and get you to building your world. So we're going to start, as most good projects do, with installing our environment with Custom System Builder right here. We're going to be using version 4.4.2, one of the last stable releases. All right, we need a dependency, no problem. And one further recommendation I have for you is to actually install a module called Custom CSS. There we are. And what that's going to allow us to do is edit our CSS within Foundry rather than using an external editor. From my personal workflow, what I've experienced is the best is to use custom CSS while developing, and once you're done making whatever changes you want, to actually cut your code out of custom CSS and paste it in an external editor where you have a little more control over how it's organized and how you view it. And that's just personal preference, and that's how I'm going to be doing it for this tutorial. It doesn't really matter if you do it that way if you're working on a smaller project, but the system I'm building within Custom System Builder, I've hit over 1,200 lines of CSS code at this point, and having that organized and being able to find my classes quickly and use the Control F function and whatnot has been invaluable and a great time saver. So that's what we're going to be setting up here as well. But let's go ahead and make our game world. Oop. Doesn't have to be anything fancy here. Just create a basic world, load it up, log in as the game master. Right. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Configure Settings, Custom System Builder, and you want a CSS file. Now, it does need to be somewhere in your Foundry folder for Foundry to access it to it. Something I found is if you right-click your Foundry icon down here, you can actually browse user data here. And we can go into our data. I personally put everything within the world folder just because this makes it easier to find later on. And in order to get started, we're going to open our editor of choice. Just for simplicity's sake, I'm using Notepad++. This is a free software to download and really good for just simple editing. So for CSS, we're going to go to File. We're going to go to Save As. We're going to paste that link here. And we're going to go save this as all file types, or you can do CSS, but I just do all types. And you're going to name it custom CSS or whatever you really want to name it, .period CSS. And that is because we're setting as all file types. Now we're having to specify that it is a CSS file. So when you save that, you should get a custom CSS file that is custom CSS. It is a CSS file. We can see that right there. Next, we're going to link that into Custom System Builder. So, World, Tutorial. It's not going to show up in this list, but we're going to go ahead and select World JSON. And we're just going to delete that out and go to Custom CSS.css. Save. In order to make sure that worked, I'm just going to do something crazy, and I'm going to say asterisk, and this selects everything. Right? That's all it means. Wildcard means select everything. We're going to select everything, and we're going to say color red. So this controls text color. This is going to make pretty much all of our text go red. Save it. Refresh. Boom. Everything's red. That's how we know our CSS file is hooked up. We'll go ahead and remove that because that's ugly, and we don't like it like that. There we go. All right, great. We got Custom System Builder installed. We got our CSS file hooked up. Next, we're going to go ahead and get Custom CSS installed and set up because, again, being able to edit without saving this file and then refreshing actually does speed up our production just a little bit. I don't actually know what code mirror is. Okay, it's a dependency for Custom CSS. All good. So we've now allowed Custom CSS to access this world. And if we go here to Custom CSS, we can open this up. And here we go. So the reason I like using this, we'll just do the same thing with color red, is because no refreshing. So while I'm actually developing, I can just quick view it. I can, if I'm doing something with my margins, so like margin right 5 pixels or something, it's going to shift everything kind of to the right a little bit. When I'm doing stuff like this, I don't have to sit here and refresh 100 times when I'm messing with small pixel values. And that just really does speed up your production. All right, so now that we've gotten our CSS, I went ahead and closed that all out. We're going to go ahead and make a template. Now, there are two types of things you need to be aware of. In Custom System Builder, you have your templates, which are what all your things are built based on, and then your actual thing. And the reason I'm saying thing and not actor is because it actually also applies to items. So you have item templates, and you have actor templates, and then your items are based on item templates, and your actors are based on actor templates. But for now, we'll worry about items later, but we'll just start with a template. I always name my templates starting with underscore just so I can quickly identify them later. Because this is the player character sheet template, I'm just going to name it player character. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on, but pretty straightforward. We have a couple options we can configure here. So we can actually go to configure sheet display, and we can change it from being 600 by 600 by default when you open it. And here we have your profile picture. Let's say we wanted it to be, twice as high as it is tall. So, or as wide, so we can have it be more of a portrait, right? And this is where we do that. But let's say we just wanted it to be twice as big because 64 pixels is a little small. And the rest of these buttons, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really mess with. you can use them, especially the attributes bar if you're putting like health bars on tokens and all this other stuff, and that we'll cover a little bit later. But for the most part, just ignore these exist, frankly, at least until you've got your feet well under you. Now these two add components, and components are just pre-made things with a custom system builder. So you might have a label or a text field or a number field, and we'll get into what all those are later. But why do we have two of them? Well, if we press F12 on our keyboard, we can actually open our console here, go to Elements, and works the same way on Chrome, but it might be in a different spot depending on how you have it docked or what settings you have going on. But it might look a little bit different, but it flows pretty much exactly the same. But there's an inspector. So we're actually going to do the inspector. And this, what it does is it makes this weird stuff happen when we move our mouse around until we click. If we click, it goes away. And what that does is it actually lets us inspect elements so we can get a good idea of what size or shape or what's going on. And so this first little button here, if you click it, actually will add a component to this section here. You can see where it says dev header fields. So it adds components to the header fields. And if you click this one, it adds the components to the body field. And that's just a little organizational thing. One thing to note is these buttons, all of these buttons, including on the actual actor. So let's go ahead and make a character sheet and call him Steve. So these buttons as well do not show up for anyone lower than Assistant Game Master. So your Assistant GM and GM roles in Foundry see these buttons, but no one else. And if you actually go to your settings, configure settings, custom system builder, down here, you can actually change the minimum role. By default is Assistant Game Master. I changed mine to Game Master because I run my games as the Assistant Game Master and I develop as the Game Master. And what that does is it means I can hide a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I don't even want to see as the Game Master, just math and additional formulas that aren't likely to be bugging out or have issues or need to be adjusted in the game. I hide behind the Game Master wall, and some of it I hide behind the Assistant Game Master wall if I want to be able to edit in the game, like health, for example. I might not want players to be able to change their health. Of course, that's a bad example. You might want your players changing their health, but just as an example, if you want them to not be able to change certain things, and we'll get into how to set all that up later. Now, very important is this little refresh button. Any changes you make on the template do not show up on the actor, even when you first made it. So even if I let me just make a label that just says test, right? And just a little word test here. It won't show up until I click that button. And even if I make a new sheet after that test has been added, I can type today, won't be here until I refresh. So that's just the first thing. And that's actually something to be very aware of. If you're ever having an issue, the very first thing you should do is properly refresh. And you also notice it didn't go away until I refreshed. There's been a number of times where I've made changes, I've saved them, but they're not happening over here, and I'm like, what's going on? And I forgot to refresh. And no, closing your Foundry server down, closing the browser, refreshing the browser, none of that refreshes the actor template. So be sure to be clicking that. And there is a reload all character sheets button on your template that reloads all character sheets with that template. So if you made a change and you want all 4 of your players or 5 of your players, whatever, to have those changes updated from in mid-game, for example, you could just click that and yeah, it'll refresh all of them. But let's get into what actually components are and do. That's really the meat and potatoes of Custom System Builder and what it's saving you a lot of your time. So we'll start in the body, and we'll start with just a label, right? We'll start with the first one. Component keys, very simply, are unique identifiers, right? They tell Custom System Builder what to save it as. So if I make this component key strength label, we'll just call it strlbl, so strength label, and I want to just say strength. And I open Steve back up, I refresh, there we go, we got strength label. And now if I go into my custom CSS, open it up, and we change str lbl to color red, Boom, strength label has gone red. Now notice that it affected both our template and our character sheet. There are reasons why or why not you might want that to happen. So a lot of times if I'm messing with especially small size or hiding things by changing the display value or any number of things, I frankly don't want it impacting the template because it can make it hard to click. Like I can click on strength to reopen this and edit it. And like, let's say I accidentally set the size of this way too small in my CSS, and well, now I can't click it. And then I got to open my F12 menu and then go to my inspector and click the nearest thing to it and then find what highlights and then go down here and find the actual the height value of it, or even just element size and say, you know, height. I can type today 20 pixels, you know, so that way I can actually grab onto something, right? Instead of doing all that, it's just a precaution for me. You can copy the document UEID from the template and treat it as a class without the actor. So .wmg for my case, save, and now it only impacts this. And that's really useful for, again, making sure you're not messing up proportions where you can't get to your things. But just for precautions, this is what I do. If you look at my CSS for my homebrew, for my custom system, almost all of my CSS starts with this unless it's an item. And there's pretty good reasons for that when I'm doing things like if I was doing editing a provided custom system builder, have a lot of classes you can call. So if I wanted to call, if I wanted to change this background texture to not be this boundary default gray, I could absolutely find where it's doing that in my F12 menu and change that image source. And then once I've done that, I might not want that to happen to items or journals because it might make them unreadable. There's any number of reasons why you might want to specify specifically actor sheets using this template. And yes, if I make another template, the UUID will be different from that. So I can actually have multiple actor sheets that have different CSS. And that's just an important little tidbit for later. So for now, we'll keep it like that. Actually, let's just go ahead and remove the color. Let's just remove that. Save. So close that out because we're not dealing too much with CSS right now. Well, how do we give our strength a value? I mean, we could just put a number there, and then now we have a number, and we have a strength score of 20. But that's not interactive. That doesn't do anything. And there's a couple ways we can approach that. The first way, and probably the most common, is to make a number field, and let's say it's our strength value. It's the value of our strength score. And we'll give it a label of strength. We'll give it a minimum value of 1 to 20, so, and a base value of 10. So, and default value, important note, only applies when the sheet is first generated. So, just for an example, we made a number field, strength 10. But now we want it to reflect here in this. So, let's actually move strength to our prefix, add a space here so it works. And let's call str val like that for a refresh. And now when we change this number, that number changes. And this might be useful because let's go to our number field. Visibility formula 0. This will make it invisible for everybody, but we don't want that. We want it to say maybe only the owner, only the person, the player who owns this character sheet can see it. So me as the GM, I can see it, and whichever player is playing this character can see it, but everyone else just sees this. But we can go and say, you know, maybe we don't even want the owner to be able to edit that, and we only want the GM or assistant GM to edit that for whatever reason. There might be some stats that are, you know, you only want to be able to control it. You don't want your players to be able to control it for some reason, and that's when you do something like that. If I saved it and refreshed, of course I'm the GM, so I'll still be able to see it, but now only the players will only see strength 15 while I see the edit box. So that might be useful for items or descriptions. A lot of the times I'll actually do a text editor, and then I'll do a text editor referencing that text editor, and so that way they can see the reference and not be able to edit it while I can edit the editor. So what is this? I didn't really explain that well. So when you're calling custom system builder functions or formulas, you actually encase them in a $, open bracket, close bracket, $, and that is a curly bracket. Let me clarify that. And so when I type in a component key, it actually references it. And if you put single quotes around it like that, it actually references the component key or the text value of it. But because we want the number, there we go. But what if we want our strength modifier to be displayed actually? Like let's say our strength modifier. So in D&D to do that, we have your strength value. I believe they subtract 10 from it and then divide by 2. But that's going to give us a decimal, so we have to round down. And so we'll say floor, which brings it to the floor, aka rounding down. You also have seal for sealing, and that's seal. And that will allow us to get our strength modifier of 4 from our 18. If we go to 20, it's 5. 19 still 4. 10 is 0. That will work in reverse as well. So 8 is -1. And we can set our minimum maximum values, like I said earlier, with that, so that we actually have a functional strength modifier for 5th edition. And as you can see, you can drag and drop to move things around. If you control drag and drop, it actually will make a copy. It'll name the component key copy 1, just as a heads up. And let's actually rename the component here to now strength mod, because this is going to come in handy here in a second, because we're going to make a button that says roll strength. So we're going to say roll str component key, and we're going to say, did not mean to click that, sorry. Let me close out of that and open it back up. Just get back to the default. No. Okay, that's fine. All we're going to do is we're going to change this to a button, and all that's going to do is change the styling. So actually, I'll do it by default, and I'll change it after, just to show you the differences in the two. And what do we want the button to say? Like, what's the button? Roll. We'll just say strength check, right? And the label icon uses font awesome. So if you go to font awesome and you find a icon that you like, you actually can just type the name of the icon here. So I've pulled up a helmet on font awesome here, helmet-battle, copy it, and paste it here. And actually it'll give us our little battle helmet next to our label. These showed up because I accidentally opened the rich text area for a second, and it just put the HTML around it, so we'll just remove that. So it's just a regular label again. And we want it to roll 1d20. So we'll open our custom system builder function with our $ curly bracket. We'll do regular bracket 1d20. We just want a flat d20 roll, right? So like that. Save it, refresh. We got our strength check. It's just a red hyperlinked custom system default hyperlink. So if I click it, rolls a d20. 1d20, we got a 12. I actually want to see the dice, so I'll add exclamation right here before the 1. Exclamation 1d20. Save, refresh. Now we can actually see the value of the dice below it, which isn't helpful in the case of we just rolled a flat d20. We kind of already knew it was an 8. But let's add our strength modifier. So we'll go to the end of it and say plus, I believe it was strmod. And we want the numeric value, so we're not going to put single quotes or anything around it. We're just going to do the component key's name. So now when I refresh, we rolled a 20, and plus 0, strength mod equals 0, equals 20. Cool. Let's give ourselves a strength score of 20. We're really strong here, so we rolled a 5 for a total of 10. That's pretty useful. But what about advantage? Well, at the end, you can actually say roll 2d20, keep highest. KH for keep highest, KL for keep lowest. But we're just going to keep it as 1d20. Alternative roll messages occur when you hold shift and click the roll button.
So let's actually make that our advantage button. I'll just copy that over. We'll KH, resave it. So if I click it, uh-oh, what'd I do? I think it's because I unchecked that box. Yeah. So click it. 1 dice, click it again, 1 dice, shift, click it. Still 1 dice. Okay. We didn't change it to 2d20. We need 2d20 to keep the highest. Otherwise, it's rolling 1 and keeping the highest, which is itself. So shift. There we go. We rolled a 2 and a 1, so 2 plus 5 is 7. Do it again. 18 plus 5 is 23. Perfect. So now we have a quick advantage button. And speaking of buttons, let's go back and change it to a button. Save. Refresh. Nice. Pretty straightforward stuff so far. These are just quick CSS stylings. Speaking of which, same thing with size. That is a common misconception, that you might want to change the size of things. So let's say we want that to be medium. Okay, that's about where we already were. So let's actually make it larger. Refresh. Oh, it's not changing sizes. Let's try with the number field just to see what's going on. We'll just make this medium size. Boom. Okay, so that works. So something about the button. Now, you might think you're locked into just choosing these sizes, and that's the misconception, is these are the only sizes you might have. In the newest custom system builder release, they gave us a thing where we can actually set custom size. Before that, and something, since I haven't updated on my custom system, what I still have to do is actually use CSS. And this actually might come in handy if you're doing some crazy things with percentages or any number of things. So let's go to our global styles. Let's change strength val is the class. We'll do both the template and the regular one. So we just disable typing there. And we'll go and say, we want the width to be 125 pixels. And since we're overriding a custom system builder setting, we'll just set it as important. And what that does is tells it tells the web browser that we're overriding something. So very often you will be seeing a lot of these important tags, especially with background colors and margins. But see now our 125 pixels. Let's say we want 275 pixels. You can do percentages and all sorts of crazy stuff here as well. But yeah, in this newest version of Custom System Builder, they actually just gave us a button to custom size of back to 200 pixels. Oh, okay, so it's just a number. You can't just px. But you can't do percentages either. So if you want to do pixels value, they did give us this, which is awesome of them. Thank you, Link. Thank you, Martin. That does save a lot of time and a lot of my one-liner CSSs. I might have to go back and update them. But now we have a basic strength check. And there's, ways that we can decorate and format this. So let's say I wanted to do let's say I wanted a table. And I want it to have 2 rows, 1 column. Actually, no. Let's do 1 row, 2 columns. Right? 1 row, 2 columns. And we'll do strength value, strength modifier, so that they're side by side. And then let's actually make a panel. And so panels are just dividers. Tables are just honestly dividers that are structured. So let's do it like that. So now our strength check is under there. Okay. I don't love how this is taking up that much space though. So let's actually go to auto. And there we go. Now they divide themselves as they so choose. And you can always, go back to smaller. That's probably too small. Let's go to small. Boom. Okay. Now what if I want this whole table to be smaller? And so we don't actually have the option to change the size of the table in Custom System Builder by the custom. So this is back to where being able to change that value is important. So we'll call this our strength table. Copy it, save it, refresh to update the changes. We'll edit strength table and we'll say max width of the table itself is going to be, we want it to be about half the page. It's probably about 400 pixels if I had to guess. Boom. Okay, so that's the table, but what about the panel? We can actually use CSS selectors to grab that panel without giving it a class. I very rarely give my panels classes. So let's say, what is the panel called? What is the class for a panel by default in Custom System Builder? And we will look. Custom System Builder editable panel. Let me make sure it's the same in the template. So here we have the body, custom system component, custom system body, root. So it's probably not that one. Let's custom system panel. There it is. That's the one we want. We'll copy it and we'll say we want the panel that has a strength table. Right? Class of custom system panel that has a table. We want the maximum width to be 400 pixels. Refresh. Now when we go and click on that panel, here it is. I'm honestly not sure if that worked. I mean, it didn't change sizes, so I can assume so. Let's say background color red. Okay, so that's still getting the strength table. Oh, I see. I forgot. This is my fault. The arrow is telling it the direct descendant. So we're saying find all panels and see if they have a strength table class as a direct descendant. So actually, we need to use the has pseudo selector, I believe. Like this. Okay. Not correct. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go look up that correct code. All right. I just added too many colons. So yeah, colon has strength table. So now we're grabbing the panel that has the strength table. So that's actually a little too big. So let's go to 300 pixels. All right. Nice. Let's remove that color red because that's just ridiculous. Perfect. Let's put another one of these beside it. Let's copy. Let's paste. Grab Steve, refresh. Now we have two of them, but they're stacked on top of each other. What if I want these side by side? Let's make another panel. Just another divider and make them display horizontally. Boom. Boom. Refresh. Well, looks like we're grabbing all panels that have strength table, not just the first one. So yeah, so we're grabbing even the first panel, and this might be where you want to give it a class, but you can also ensure it's a direct descendant. Let me go figure out how to do that real quick. Okay, so the easiest answer I found was to go ahead and specify only panels underneath a panel with that. So it should, yep, there we go. Refresh this. So now we've specified only the panel that has the div and it's under another panel, which basically leaves the first panel alone since it's not under another panel. Maybe not the most elegant solution, but whatever works. But this is still not displaying side by side as it is on our template. So why? This is the full width, has a space. Looks like it grows with the sheet, so it's not a thing with it not having enough room to do it. So I think it might be something to do with the display. So if we go down to this div, which is where we set the max width already, and just to play with it, I use the F12 menu to play with things because it gives you autofill, and I can just sit here and go, okay,
Well, which of you are going to do it for me? Just go down the list. This is just a very dirty way of trying things. Okay, looks like Ruby will work, but I try to avoid using ones I don't exactly know. If there's other ones I'm more familiar with. So it looks like Ruby's the only one willing to do it for me right now. Well, okay, that's fine, but there's other ways we can do it. Grid of 2 columns. Boom. This basically sets it as a flexbox container, which means it's going to display things as a flexible grid. So if we go and we look at that first panel and look at the custom system builder default settings, yeah, there we go. So it was one level lower. We can see it's actually setting things as a grid with grid templates and stuff. And that's actually important because let's say for whatever reason we didn't want it to be an even split, right? Let's say we want this to be, width, fill, okay, 100%. Didn't work. The minimum width it can be is 100%. Yeah, there we go. Minimum width it can be is 100%, so it's always going to be. But let's say I wanted the one on the left to be bigger than the one on the right for whatever reason. We can actually go into our CSS and say something along the lines of grid. Oh, what is it? Spend a lot of time looking in this F12 menu, looking at the code console commands, the CSS options we have. I believe it was grid template columns, honestly. 75, 5%, 25%. There we go. So now we have it set like that. But that looks a little funky. So let's do 60, 40. Perfect. So that would work. And we just go in here and add it to our CSS if that's what we wanted to keep, but I don't. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that. We'll reopen our character sheet. I do want it to take up 100% of the width, though. That is something I want to happen. I don't love that it's not. And I think it's that max width right here. No, that's the panel containing the I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the words, the table. So we can just go to custom system panel, and say, actually, instead of doing that globally, I don't want to do that globally just because, the defaults work for most things I want out of the box. So instead of doing that, let's just go here. We'll give it an additional CSS class and we'll say fill width. We'll give it a class, fill width. So now we can actually reuse that class later. We'll say fill width. And we'll say we want its width to be 100%, but we also had to set its minimum width to be 100%. Boom. Perfect. And it would be easy enough to go through here and say dex value. Dex mod. Dex. Make sure you're changing things in your formulas as well. Save. Go ahead and make sure that all worked. It did a bit of a weird thing where it raised that up higher, and we can absolutely go and edit that with CSS and figure out why, and I'll show you how to do that just for fun, but there we go. Everything seems to be working. So looks like our label needs to be align self center. Yep. That's the line we needed. See, we can see that's the change. So we can even go through and give these all classes if we wanted to. But frankly, for something so small, I would rather just say,
use the provided class strength value, comma, which means also and dex value. If we had more, you could just keep doing commas, but we don't, and say align self center, right? And for smaller one-line edits, I normally put them in line like this just to save a little space, make my life a little easier later, unless I have like a lot going on like this. Boom. All right, cool. So now we've learned how to make panels, tables, what they mean, adjust the left and right values so they can be, you know, a little spaced, a little nicer. We've learned about buttons, a little bit about labels, just how they can function as buttons, how we can call references and values in them. There are some pretty neat tricks that you can do with CSB using CSS though. So let's say I wanted to do, like, just for fun, a little bit of a bar chart, right? So let me go to component key and we'll say strength bar, and we'll say in the text area, because we can do HTML in these and we can call classes from CSB, but we'll worry about making custom CSB components using their classes later. But just as an example, some of the power you have, we can say div, all right, style equals, so some inline CSS editing here. We want its width to be, I don't know, this is 400 pixels, let's say, or 300 pixels, sorry, 1/3 of the space, width 100, and we want height, let's say the minimum height first. We want the minimum height this thing can be to be 30 pixels, and we want the actual height, other than the minimum, to be equal to strength val times 10 pixels, close. And the background color be red. All right, and that should make a nice little, did I include too many? Oops. Didn't need that, that was useless. Boom. So now as we change the value of strength val, we actually change the height of the bar. Let's do the same thing over here. Oop. Boom. Dex bar. I want this to equal to dex val. Refresh. We want it to be blue. And the reason I set the minimum is because, you know, if it gets really small, you want to still be able to click it and see it, especially on your template. That can get kind of annoying. But you can do things like align that to the bottom line using justify content and whatnot to actually make it look like a bar chart or any number of cool displays you want. But I was just showing, the point of that was just to show you, you can use Custom System Builder to actually input into inline CSS. And we can get into some really fun stuff we can do with that later, but that's just something to be aware of. Your labels are by far your most powerful component. So let's go ahead and delete those out. So just to recap, we've learned to make tables, and tables are just rigid dividers of data. We've learned to make panels. Panels are just flexible dividers of data, and we learned how to adjust the sizing of those panels and dividers and tables, as well as align and justify contents, and also to use inline CSS to actually call CSB values. So let's continue learning about our components here. Again, we have our visibility components. We have tooltips, which are just nice to on hover. I like to personally use those for things like shift click for advantage. And so what that'll do is when I actually, looks like I actually broke this. Was it? Visibility. I put it in visibility formula and not the tooltip. Visibility formulas are just formulas that if result to true, and since we didn't actually have it equal to anything, it was resulting to false, it makes it invisible.
So if they're resulting to true, they become visible. But now if we do hover over it, shift click for advantage. Just a little nice UI thing for your players. All right, so we've covered tooltips, we covered visibility, CSS, label styles, sizes, prefixes. Yeah, that's pretty much labels other than doing custom components. Text fields are like labels, except for players can edit these. And this is kind of why you might want to reference using a label if you don't want them to edit things. For items, all the time, especially for items, I have it where I see all the boxes on the GM mode, so I can edit the items, change their damages and whatnot, but the players only see the actual resulting damages. Same thing with, math and formulas and behind the scenes. I do a lot of things with text number fields and just input components that players can't see because, frankly, they don't need to see that kind of stuff. And that's just something to keep in mind as you're building your sheet. So text field, really straightforward. You have a label, which is just a prefix to it. So if I just want to say, what's your character's height, right? You can set the length of how many characters I can put it in. You can change. I only want it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. I also want it to be able to allow it to asterisk and for feet and inches. I only want it to be up to, let's actually just leave no maximum. And let's say by default it's 5 foot 8 inches as default height. That seems about average. Autocomplete formula. If they start typing, you can type in autocomplete formula so it auto pops up and they can autofill. It's going to make me give it a component key, it looks like, so we'll give it a pivot key and say character height. There we go. Refresh. Boom. But I want to change it. Let's call them 2 foot. Oh, can't do it. 3 foot 7. Boom. We got our little height there. And the reason I did that as a text field and not a number field was so that you can include your little foot and inches symbols. But maybe that's too much. You don't want to do that. That might be crazy. Let's actually just do a number field, and we'll say the height can be minimum of 3 foot and maximum of 7 foot with a default of 5. And then refresh, and then see, now it's giving me not number errors because I had other values in there. You can do inches, height, feet and inches. You can do it that way. However, whatever works for you. So numbers and text, pretty straightforward. I will say there is a bit of a distinction between numbers and labels referencing numbers. Certain items can reference and modify number fields, but not labels, and other ways around, as in you can reference and edit labels, but not number fields, and we'll get into that. That's when you start getting into items and cross-referencing formulas, and let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. So relative modification, field controls just let you, so relative modification, I'll actually show that demo value, save, refresh. Relative modification just means if I have the value of 5 and I say +5, did I not allow it? That should have worked. Refresh, +5, +56. Value must be numeric. Five, 0, 20. Save. Okay. It's because I was trying to enter 5 + 5 and not deleting out. So if I have 10 - 5, and just select it before you start typing. So +7, 12. Okay, cool. And then you can also do field controls, which allow you to see little pluses and minuses when you hover it. Pretty cool. Frankly, I find these oftentimes, especially if you're dealing with something of a smaller size, can get in the way. See, they spill over and they cover text. So sometimes, it actually might be in your interest to make a button with a label and say font awesome plus should be 1, I think. We want this to be equal to, what was the component key of this? Demo. We want it to be equal. We want to set property and entity itself. The component key demo equal to demo plus 1. I think this will work. Let's try it. Refresh. Boom. We added one to demo. And so you might be thinking, why are we adding the little single quotes? Doesn't that make it a reference to string value? Normally, yes, but it's in the function of set property entity, and that is breaking up with the commas, telling us, okay, this all before the comma is one thing, comma, this is the next thing. So it's a little bit different when you're in Custom System Builder for functions and formula. Set property and entity sets a property within an entity. We're telling it within the entity that's containing this macro itself or inside this thing itself with the component key of equal to demo equal to demo plus 1. So itself plus 1. So being able just to add. And yeah, you might notice that's a little off center. You can change the margin of, I believe it's under the I element. So if we go here, we find the I element. Yeah, there's a little bit of a margin right here. You can disable in your CSS if you want. If you get that selector in class to down to that level, and you can remove it to make it centered, or you can just remove the background box, the border, and the box shadow, and just have the text shadow when you hover it, or however you want to style that. But you can actually just make your buttons that way, and we'll show some pretty cool uses for that kind of stuff again later. So that's our labels, our text fields, our number fields. What's rich text area? Well, that's if you really don't want to get too much in CSS for certain things. It can be kind of nice. So you actually get this nice little Foundry provided editor, and you can add headings of heading 1, and this is some, oh my God, box is on. This is some subtext. Save. Give it a class, RTA for rich text area. Doesn't matter what you name your component keys, but also you can't have duplicates, but there we go. So, and players can click on that and edit it, so that is something to be aware of. Let's see, what is the next component? Checkboxes, pretty cool. They just output a 1 or a 0 value based on whether or not they're checked. So we could say, I don't know, proficiency. I'm not going to try to spell proficiency right now. We want proficiency. Let's say prof. We'll put it there. We'll put it here. We need it actually to be different for each one. str prof. And we'll say dex prof. So now we have these little checkboxes that tell us whether or not we're proficient in this. And by default, they don't do anything. So let's actually edit our strength modifier. And we can go in here and say, we'll use a little bit of conditional logic. So let's paste this in the role message just to hold it so we can keep it for later. Let's open our custom system builder, letting it know we're not just typing text. And we want to say strength prof question mark. So this is saying, is strength prof true? But if you want to be a little more specific, you can say equal to 1, right? Or equal to 0 if you want to be false. But I think just strength prof should work, and let's just test it. If strength prof is true, let's say hi. If not, we'll say bye. And just let's take a look at that code. So single quotes, again, we're not getting the string value of it, but we're kind of working within a function. We're also working with a string, so either way, this is okay. Question mark is telling that this is an if statement. If this resolves to true, do this, else do this. Okay. So, bye, hi, perfect. Now, instead of saying hi and bye, that's a bit silly. Let's say we want our strength value equal to the old thing. Let's remove
since we're already within one of those. Okay, if it is true, we want it to be equal to this, so we'll put an extra parenthesis in it, plus 2. Or even we can say plus proficiency if we had that as a value, but let's just say plus 2 for now to keep things simple. And if not, we just want it equal to the old thing. Save, refresh, -3, -5. Okay, something's not wrong, right? We have a strength equal to 1, so it should be 0, 2. Okay, so that is working perfect. And this became a button because we put that there. Let's remove that. Boom. So now we have proficiency modifiers, and we can even go back and add an extra column here. Move this over 1, move this over 1, and put it in front. There we go. And we could do the same over here, but we're not going to worry about that for right now. Again, you can do min width with the CSS to make that wider, whatnot, just however you want to make it look nice. Let's see, what else can we do here? Oh, actually, that checkbox is visibility formula. That might be another thing. Maybe you want an edit lock. You can actually go into visibility formula of whatever you want, and just reference the checkbox as well. So we can say strength prof, because that's already a checkbox we have. That's how you would do an edit lock. That's just a nice little thing to do. Let's see. Radio buttons. They're pretty much the same thing as a checkbox, but you can only have one of them checked. So you have multiple radio buttons within a group. So let's say we have a component key of 1. Okay, it doesn't want us to do that, but we'll say radio 1. We'll say value of 1, group of test with a value of 1. Copy. Copy. One thing to note is if you have radio keys that have the same value, it kind of freaks out when you're trying to click. Sometimes it'll go to the wrong one. So make sure your values are different. Value specifically. So you don't have to have numbers before them, but now we have 1, 2, or 3. So if you have to make a selection between 2 or 3 things, and you only want them to choose one, this is one of the ways you could make them do that. One way I used this was for races selection, like for being able to choose your race. I had radio buttons for each of the races. That way they could only select one. You can CSS style the button actually to be a whole area, and then put like a panel in front of it to hide it. And I'll show you more of that later. But so we have our radio buttons. Meters. Meters are gauges. Like if you want to show progress between 0 and your current health, max health, and 0. So let's actually make a health bar. And the label is just going to be health. And we want the value to be equal to current health. We'll make a number killer for that with a minimum of 0, because you can't go to the negatives in our system for whatever reason. And we want the maximum to be, you know what? Let's do it this way. Max, choose the bigger number, 10, or strength, str, value, times 10. Right? So now our maximum health is dynamic. Refresh, we got our health bar. And what do we say? Equal to current health. Copy that. We'll give it a little numeric value, current health. We'll give it a label, just so we don't lose track of what it is later. Current health. Current health is equal to 5. Okay, what's going on here? Strength value. Make sure this is right. Okay, that's not it. Is it because I capitalized max? Yep, it's because I capitalized max. So current health 5 of 10 times 10 would be 100, so that's very low. Let's say we wanted to do full 100. Cool. And actually, let's take that maximum formula and make it the maximum value of our current health as well. And what that's going to do is if I try to set my health to 500, it says no. So that can be pretty useful. Minimum value of 0. If you wanted to, you could do a label afterwards and say health max and just do that as well. So you could see that. Even make a little panel, horizontal display, centered, current health. If I can drop it right. Boop, max health. So now we have current health of max health, and let's do a prefix of that. And part of the neat thing about doing it this way is we could actually now, since we have this as a variable, go back. I don't know why I did it that way. Go back and set, instead of having the formula everywhere where it's doing the math everywhere, let's just make it do the math in one spot, just to make it a little neater on the code side. And also if we ever want to edit how max health is calculated, we can do it in one spot. So that's our current health system. Well, what if I don't want this ugly green? All right, that's something people complain about a lot, is being able to change the color of meters. Well, you know, I could change the display in that, by the way. Not really something I like to do, but I could. There's no setting for changing the color. So this is when we get a little bit back into the F12 menu. Let us give this a class. Oh, it already has a class, right? I can just take a health bar. So let's take .health bar, and there's going to be a class somewhere in here that tells us where the color is. Custom system meter fill. And I just clicked inspect and clicked on it. And here it is. It's changed the color right here. So let's take that color. Started doing CSB functions in there. You shouldn't do that. Background, color, red, important. There we are. But what if I don't want it to be red? What if I want it to actually be RGBA? So, or just RGB. RGBA just means you have an alpha variable at the end. Let's say I want it to be 25. Well, that's just going to be white. 35, 100, 35. And then we want it to be full. 1 just means 100%. So 100% alpha channel, meaning 100% opacity. So if you wanted, 35%, you could go 35. But we want 1. So actually, we'll even just remove the alpha channel. Not really useful for this particular thing. Boom. Now we have that green. Well, I want it to be more red. And less green. And there we go. So that's how you use RGB and CSS. That's how you edit your meter colors. And if you go up a level from fill, you can see this is actually where you decide the outline of custom system meters. What if I wanted to go to health bar and then the outline class and then say max height 6 pixels? Okay, that didn't do it. It's because I have a period right here. Haha. Okay, sorry, typos. They'll be the death of you all the time. But so we've set the minimum and the maximum height. Let's just remove the minimum because that's not really what we're dealing with. So it looks like the minimum height does actually have to be overridden. That's interesting. What about the maximum? Interesting enough, it's just the minimum height. I'm not sure why that is, but here we are. Overriding just the minimum height lets you change the thickness of that bar. You can change the color, and there you go. So that's a little bit about editing meters. All right, so what other useful little bits do we have? Drop downs, pretty handy. You can go ahead and fill them out with keys or just invisible values referring to what's going on. So let's say 1. Let's say this is our class selection, barbarian, all right? Might be any number of things you're using this for, but 2, fighter, or 3, monk. These are the 3 you can do, and by default, key is 1. Label class. Key class selector. Refresh. Boom. Now, note if you don't put a default value, it'll actually have a blank option players can select, and it will be blanked by default. So I normally do have it select something, but just depends on what you're using it for. And you can actually reference what you have selected elsewhere. So you can say class selector, and that should output 1. See? And you can use that in your if statements that we went over earlier to do all sorts of crazy stuff. So we'll get into some cool uses of that. I guess I could show you a switch case to change the text color of certain things based on your class if you wanted to. But for now, just to keep it simple, if I put these here, it should show me barbarian. No, okay, it shows me the component key. That's fine. Now, what if I wanted to say barbarian? Well, if class selector equals 1, it's equal to barbarian. Barbarian. If it's not, do nothing. But if it's equal to 2, do fighter. And you can chain them by doing if not this, but this is so much easier to keep up with. So, barbarian, fighter, nothing. See? So we'll go ahead and add monk on there. Boom. So another interesting thing about dropdowns is you can actually have them instead of fill, where you mainly put them on this way. You can actually have them reference a dynamic table or a formula. Formulas are, I haven't found a use for them, but maybe you do give them options based off of something, like if they have a permission, or maybe this is where JavaScript might come into more handy. But let's make a dynamic table to show you how to reference a dropdown there. So what if I wanted to make my classes in a dynamic table? Make a dynamic table. We'll call it class list. Right? I'll just make a dynamic table. Boom. Easy enough. And all this is a table that you can add rows to easily. But let's see. Sort options. Can players add rows? Let's say no. Okay. Pretty much we'll leave it everything as default. We don't really need to change any of that. This plus in the template lets you add a new row. A new column. So we'll call this class name. We'll go name. And we'll just make this a text field. Easy enough. So now when we refresh, name has a thing, and we go fighter. Barbarian. Monk. And now we can go here and say, instead of having these from here, we can say get it from the dynamic table, and we'll call it class list. So get from the class list. Column to use from the option, we call it class name. So we need the component key of the column we're using. So get the class names from the class list. And let's not have a default. That's fine. Boom. So now there's our options. Let's add a new one. Ranger. There we are. And you can add another row and even say, let's give it a label, right? And we'll call it primary stat, and we'll say main stat here, and we'll go I want to look up the class name and give it a list. It's like, so like if it's fighter, we want strength, right? So how are we going to do that? We will do same row. So we're looking up in the same row class name, right?
That should just give us another row list of same stuff. No? Let me look on the wiki real quick. I'll be right back. All right, got that sorted out pretty easily. Had to add single quotes around the class name because we're in a function. Easy enough. So now we have that. So now let's make this an if statement. If it's equal to 1, or if it's equal to fighter, right? If it's equal to the word fighter, we want it to be strength. Else, do nothing. Right? Same thing for barbarian, actually, right? Barbarian, strength, no problem. What if it's a monk? We want it to be probably dex, if I had to guess. Dex. And what about ranger? Still dex. Refresh. Okay, we got some errors, 4 errors. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna look on the wiki to get a better answer on this. All right, so on the wiki FAQ, buried in the weeds here, we did find that we need to use the equal text function. So equal text drop-down key, dexterity, for example. So let's give that a try. Let's go here and say equal text, same row, boom. Does it have to have additional parentheses? So equal text drop down, yes, it does have to have the a single quote, sorry. Class name, comma, fighter, boom. So now let's delete the rest out. Let's just try this first one to reduce our workload a little bit. Strength, perfect. So let's copy that. And let's say barbarian, monk, and ranger. And if I remember, it was dex. Dex. And I'm not really trying to keep exactly to the 5A rules. I'm just making things just to show you how they work. So as you can see here, perfect. All right. So pretty straightforward so far. Tabbed panels actually are pretty cool. I actually really like using these because you can actually make like dividers. So like let's say I wanted this to be all one tabbed panel, and we'll call it info. And call this the info tab. I think I did that backwards. So we'll go to the edit. We'll do info. So character info is the key, info is the name. Perfect. And now this is all, let's move that panel, all under the info tab. And now let's say I wanted to have an inventory tab. NV. Save. Refresh. Can't see it because it's not on the right tab. And that's just really helpful for organization. So, item displayers. Well, that's going to bring us into items. So, this is probably the last component I'll cover because I'm going to be honest with you, I have never used these two. I've also never used user input templates, so those are something that aren't really in the scope of this tutorial. We're just trying to get the basics out of the way. So let's look at the conditional modifier selector and the active effects at a much later date. So let's take an item displayer. Let's make it, and we'll call it inventory. Let's actually put that under the inventory tab. So to do that easily, we'll move it out of that panel, go to inventory, and put it under that panel. So now when we go to our inventory tab, we have an inventory displayer. So items work a lot of the same way as character sheets. So template, I want to put my templates all in one tab, or one folder. We'll call this MISC gear. We'll call it MISC gear. MISC gear.
Mess gear will have a profile image. I made that an item. Create equipable item template. Real quick, sub-templates are if you're going to have a lot of repeating things between multiple different template types. So if all of my item templates are going to have item descriptions or use the same stats, for example, my weapons, all, for example, will have the same options or damage out, like not necessarily the values, but they all have the same input keys. I can actually just make a sub-template and drag and drop them onto the new templates as I make them. Or so if I want to make we'll just actually go ahead and do one real quick. We'll call it a melee weapon, right? And this will cover our swords and spears and blah, blah, blah. But also we want a sub item template called damage, or actually call it weapon stats because it's more than damage. And for weapon stats, let's lay it out in a table. Call it weapon stat. And we want it to have, I don't know, 4 rows, 2 columns. And we'll say, I'm just kind of throwing stuff together. I don't actually have any kind of real plan for this. So, I don't know, a number field of base damage and damage 0, 5, 2 by default. Base modifier, right? And this might be a drop down, and this can even reference a dynamic table or something. But you know, we know our stats are the strength of dex in the system. I will call it 1 str 2 dex. Default it to 1. I actually want to give it a label and say base stat. You know, honestly, that's enough to get the point across. So now when we make a melee weapon, we can take our weapon stat, drop that in there. And we can do the same thing when we go and make a range weapon. And when you're doing your system, I hope you are paying more attention to your typos than I am. Equip the weapon template and give it the weapon stat. And frankly, I do sub-templates in another folder just to keep up with them. So now we have melee weapons and range weapons, and you know, you can add more components that way if you want. And that just speeds up your production a little bit. But now let's make a new folder, and we'll call this all items. And I mean this as in literal items, not just anything that is a quote item in Foundry's perspective, because Foundry considers anything that's inside of a character sheet that modifies it in any way. So an item in Foundry's definition would be things like your abilities, your features, your skills, status effects, conditions, anything you might drag and drop onto a character that impacts them. So when I make my item folder, I'm referring to this as literal items, and we'll call it let's give it a sword, right? We want a sword, and we wanted to base it on a melee weapon. There we go. So now we have a sword item. And when we drop the sword into the character template, it shows up in the item displayer. And this will display all items in the character. So and again, this is the Foundry definition of items. So this is going to display if I made a sick status effect, and that's an item, and put it in here. It would display here too. So how do we make this just literal items displaying? Well, filters. You can say, okay, I only want it to show weapons. This could be our weapon template. Or I only want it to be, I want it to say item.name, right, equals sword, right? I think that's how that works. Let's make another one real quick. Let's make a, I don't know, a knife. It's still a melee weapon, right? Boom, knife. Drag it in there. Still worked, so something is wrong with our display. Why? Oh, this little nice UI button, we don't need to enter that. So it's still not working. Okay, next question. Why not? Item name equals sword. So item dot is telling it to look at the items, look at the item, and then the component key, by default name is a component key, is equal to sword. So
I wonder if it's equal text. Because we just had that issue a minute ago, right? No. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay. So I was really confused why this wasn't working, but the code was working. For some reason, I just had to close and open the character sheet, and that took me way longer than I'd like to admit to find out. But anyway, equals text item name is equal to sword. So now it's sword filtering by if the name is sword. Could also just filter by melee weapon, range weapon. That lets you get a little more customization with your inventory. But you can also look up by other components. So let's say I go into my my melee weapon template, and I say, I can manually define a value of 1 to sort, like as a manual label. But even more interesting, let's do a checkbox, and let's say is equipped. So are these items equipped? Sword, refresh, knife, refresh. And there's a refresh all in the template. I just didn't click it while I was here, but reload all item sheets. That would have done the same thing as manually opening both. So now if we refresh these, because items and actors do not refresh, they'll have the equipped button. Let's give the sword the equipped feature. And now we can even say in here, item dot is equipped, which is our component key. Refresh. Now sword shows up, but knife doesn't. All right, let's make another item container, copy and paste that one, and say, I believe it's not item equipped. Boom. So now if it's not equipped, it'll be down here, and if it is, it'll be up here. So we can actually have inventories filter like that. We can even go in and add an extra column on our item container. And let me go steal the code off the wiki real quick. They were, and I'll even pull this up on this screen for you. They were even kind enough to provide a lot of things you might want already on the wiki. And yes, you had to go to plan wiki. It's not just the main screen there. And that is an important note. A lot of the stuff isn't on that main screen, but is in the wiki. Let's go to the FAQ. And if I remember correctly, checkbox and item containers, my fault. There it is. So Martin already was kind enough to provide this code to add equipped. So we're just going to steal that and put that in ours real quick. Label, right? Component key, equipped function. We'll just name it whatever we want. And we're going to take this. So what this is doing is it's making an image of a checked square, and it's changing it to either green or red if it's equipped or not. So it's making a superficial or not quite real checkbox as if Custom System Builder built it. No, this is just a HTML approximation, but it does work. And in our label role message, we're going to include the function set property and entity of the item that it's next to in the item container, because it's going to make one of these for each of them. And we need to change the, like that, I believe. I think I put a T in there. Let me double check my, yeah. So now, when we click that, it unequips it. And we'll do the same thing for down here. So now when we click it, false. True. Did I not need to flip that? Looks like I didn't need to flip that. Okay. So now when we click these, it actually equips and disequips our items for us inside here. And you know what? I don't want it doing that in the chat. So that's actually where we're going to come up with this little button here. Send role message chat needs to be off. Seems like it's only on for one of them. There we go. Refresh. And now it no longer spams our chat and roles. Cool. So, and you can do inline CSS to make this, instead of a checkbox or whatever. You can do all sorts of things with that, like make it not look like that. You can make it a hollow image versus a filled-in image, and I'll give you a visual example of that in a little bit. But one thing I will say is I want it to be the other way around, red versus green, because we're not, there we go. So it is equipped, it isn't equipped. And let's even give it a column name of equip. Equipped. Boom. Boom. There we go. So that's how you filter items, and you can do all sorts of things with that. So not just equipped or disequipped, but you can do like filter by item names. You can do filter by what template they're using. So you could have this only be melee weapons, only range weapons. This one's only melee weapons currently, based on what template they use. You can actually grab information from inside the component. So like if I wanted to put that it's a strength weapon, I could say primary stat viz for visualization, stat, and then we can just go in here and say item dot. I actually forgot the component key we used for that, so let's open that up. Okay, that's not the template, so I can't actually do it that way. So let's go here. Let's go melee weapon. Base stat. So base modifier is actually what we called it. So let's call it item dot base modifier. And then refresh. So it's going to say 1 because the component key. And you can actually have strings in the keys. So we can just do it that way. Let's actually reload all modifiers there. Refresh the sheets. Refresh in here. Refresh in here. And see that says strength. Let's equip the knife. It's strength. Let's actually make the sword dex space. Or actually, let's make the knife dex space. That makes more sense. There we go. So if you wanted to just show the dice value, you could say, damage is blah, blah, blah. You can even, like I said earlier with the HTML, you can actually make buttons. So let's make a button using Custom System Builder. Let's just say roll me, and let's make it a button, and we'll have, well, we'll leave the roll blank. So now we have a roll me button that doesn't do anything. If we press F12, go to our item or our inspector, go to elements. So here we go. This is the syntax for a button. It's a div with a button under it. Okay, pretty straightforward. Let's actually give it a function. Actually, do we need to do that? Give me 1 second. No, we don't need to give it a function because this will handle it. So if I wanted to take this button, inspect, go to the highest level that highlights the button, this one. Let me just copy that HTML. Edit as HTML, copy, add here, button attack. And you could even go in and say, is this a visual function? You could say has attack and make a checkbox whether or not it can attack to show whether or not this button shows up, just for a cleaner UI. But label text, div class custom system label button data value data name roll me. All right, let's change roll me to attack. Save, refresh. Okay. So what's different about our button and that button? So that's just the div. It actually doesn't seem to have the button class around it. I didn't grab that. Looks like I need to grab this whole div here. I grabbed a div too low. So let's go ahead and edit as HTML. Copy. Go to weapon attack. Paste it over that. Change roll me back to attack. Save. Refresh. Now we have an attack button. Let's delete roll me because we don't need that anymore. And this is where we go back into being able to use labels to make the other types of stuff. So you could actually make a meter the same way. And I'll show you an example from my custom system in a second of where I've used that to make a a health meter that has temporary HP, or on the right side that actually kind of shows up in the same bar, or it also actually shows max health damage taken away from the max health, so you don't so you can actually see how as a percentage how much that's taken away from you. But so let's say label role message item dot base damage, I believe. Let me verify. Item base damage, weapon stat, item base damage. Yep. Just to paste it over, just to be safe. So let's take, so that's +2. Let's go back to our melee weapon, and let's say copy this here and call it base dice. 0 to 2 to 5 is okay. Let's call it dice quant, right? And then just beside it, we'll do dice face. Dice face. So we're rolling 2d, minimum 2 with a maximum of 100 because you have d100s. Default, let's say 4. Refresh, reload all item sheets. Again, that doesn't get the ones interactor already, unfortunately. So refresh these. So now we have 2d4, and you can use CSS and not put it in a table and do a bunch of things to make this look really nice. But let's now use those to go to weapon attack, and I want to do item base dice, right? I believe I have to do it this way. D item base quant plus item base damage. That should work. Let me verify real quick that I got the right item dice face. Not okay. So I already got the wrong component key. So, and what about this component key? Dice quant dice face. So, weapon attack. Yeah, so that's okay. Refresh. So now if I roll this, 2d4 equals, so 3 and 4, 7. Perfect. Doesn't look like it added the base. So let's look at, I don't know if I actually rolled this sword. Yeah, I did. So it's not getting this, but it is rolling the 2d4, so that's all good. So let's go back to our item, melee weapon, base damage, weapon attack, roll item base damage, D, and dice. So the face. And you know what? I wanted to show the dice values at the bottom, plus item dot base damage. That should be working. Let's give that one more try. Let's refresh it. Sword. 2 plus 4 is 6. Okay, so it is working. Perfect. I really don't like that result being the way it is. So let's actually go ahead and remove that. Adding a hashtag before your roll will silence it. When I look at the console, why didn't I roll? Cannot read properties, undefined is reading as draw. So I think I just put that in the wrong spot. Let's try there, outside of the bracket. And that I didn't put enter, that's just where it breaks. Perfect. That does stop the other dice from showing, which is unfortunate. But the reason I want this to be silent is I don't want that 8 to be there. I actually want to say silent roll. I think it's colon equals, and then I want to say output the roll So the value, so I can code it with CSS. Let's do it this way. Okay, after a little playing around, for some reason it doesn't want to take inline CSS. So all I did was I wrapped the role in a div instead of a span, and I gave it a class of test, and I went and I found the class, aka the div, with that class, and went one level lower, which is where the actual numeric is outputted, and changed its color that way. So let's go ahead and make role silent again. Let's clear out all this mess out of our chat. Let's go ahead and refresh our character sheet and roll. So now we have our 6 like that, and we actually have the ways to control it now. So if we say background color, actually that's probably the div itself, but let's try it with background color none. Okay, no, so we need to go up a level for this one, so that test, background color none. Okay. Maybe it's not happening at that level. Where is this happening? And this is the thought process you're going to be going through the whole time you're doing this. So it looks like it is actually the span. So I say it's not background color, it's just background. Background for this one. So background, none. Okay, cool. Didn't have to import in that one. Nice. Border, none. There we go. Now we got our red number 6. And let's go back to editing our role here. And let's say result. Right? And just for one more time, I want to save. I'm going to try to export the dice and see if I can get just the dice to show up. No. That's fine. Anyway, so result, div class 7. You know what? That div is taking up 100% of the inline and breaking it down. So let's actually say display in the line and width fit title. Save. Okay. What else is result taking up 100% of the line as well? No, but test is. So it's not the span, but test. Don't know why that's not highlighting blue. But so let's go ahead and go back. Say here, test. Oh, I didn't need to tab that in. Okay. Why is this not keeping my... Okay. Save. There we go. Result 7. And let's remove the color. Boom. Is there any spacing issues we should fix? Result 9. No, that's fine. And yeah, you can absolutely go and code an HTML table. So if I wanted to go, table t-body, which says define the body of the table, tr for a row, td for a cell, and then say paragraph in that, and put a result in that first paragraph inside that table data section. Then I want to go for the next one and go td for this, p for this, like that. Save, close, clear the chat. And so now we got a table with 2 cells, with a result on the left, or sorry, with the label result on the left and the actual role on the right. And if you notice, if you hover over it and you do that, it will pop up the result. You can remove that, I believe, by, I think, with the hashtag. No, okay, that suppresses it entirely. You can definitely remove that. Here, for example, I could say pointer event none, I believe. Refresh, and
So pointer event none doesn't seem to work. What's the actual code? Pointer events, plural, my fault. So now nothing happens when I mouse over it. And you can continue to do stuff like that, like, for showing the quantity of dice, the result total, maybe anything you've added, like modifiers. You can do all sorts of cool stuff with that there. But this video is already getting really long, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of Foundry here. I'm going to load up my personal server, and I'll show you some of the things that you can actually do, or that I've done using just these basic concepts. All right, so here's my actual character sheet. So we have a drop-down box that fills from not from a dynamic table, but from an item container, which are under here. This item container fills to there. We have meters that we made using labels within a dynamic table. You can also reference journal actors. Journals, which are just a Foundry native thing, not really CSB specific, so I'm not really going to cover that here. Items that are filtered by, not just templates, but names and whatnot, can be done here. Stored items that impact your carry weight. So when you store it, your carry weight will actually go down. So let me take my water skin, store that, 36.8, 29.2. Favorite section, just for quick access. Equipped. You can roll. So if I actually go to my iron dagger, you can see how I can choose the stat it rolls based off of. Result that's not, the way CSB defaults it by default. Shows you exactly what it is. I should probably remove those pointer events, honestly. That's something I'll handle later. A meter that's made custom, but I've added, additional fill sections using just an extra span or div, the same way Custom System Builder builds them by default for the first one, but then floated to the right side instead. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You have to be a GM to see this currently, but an actual radiograph that's based on these values. So if I were to convert these to number fields real quick and change the value, when it's not formatted, when you can see everything from the character creator I built and whatnot. So if this goes from a negative 100 to a positive 100, so let's go 10, positive 100, minus 100, 50, 0, 10. So that all updates in real time, and that's just a little bit of understanding. Let me undo those instead of doing it. That should go back to normal. There we go. And that's just understanding, a little bit about, HTML and CSS, setting up a radar container with an SGV file, a couple of line tags, and that's way outside the scope of what we're doing here. But this is, just a label that we've coded HTML and CSS directly into. Same thing with, we made a little Blades in the Dark style clock, just out of, a panel with a table and then, labels within it. Same thing with these nice little dividers that show, whether or not you have a level of trauma. Again, Blades in the Dark style there. Buttons that control a number field that's invisible. I can't even see it, but that is reflected in a label because it just looked a lot neater to do it that way in this particular case. So yeah, I mean everything in this sheet is just what I've shown you already taken to an extreme. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped you get a clearer picture of what's possible within Custom System Builder and how to start building out your own system within Foundry VTT. If you're interested in one-on-one tutoring or even commissioning out part of or all of your system, I'm available for commission.
And I also help out in the Discord channel for free most of the time with smaller issues or pointing you in the right direction of how to do something. And not just me, but there are several members in the community that have been absolutely fantastic and just so welcoming to new members and helping you solve any issues you might have. So absolutely feel welcome to join the Discord. The link for which is going to be in the bio down below, as well as for the GitHub page itself for Custom System Builder, where you can find it as well. Feel free to reach out, and until the next time, happy building, and may your rules be kind.